What if you thought of your entire life not as just a series of events, but as one giant experiment? Well, that's the core idea behind one of the most famous autobiographies ever written, Mahatma Gandhi's The Story of My Experiments with Truth. It's this incredible look at a life lived as a kind of laboratory, in a constant search for something bigger.
In this one sentence, it's really the key to the whole thing. For Gandhi, life wasn't something that just happened to him. No, every action, every choice, every single challenge was a deliberate test. It was an experiment designed to get him closer to a fundamental reality he called truth. I mean, that's a pretty radical way to look at your own life, right?
And that's a fascinating question, isn't it? It kind of frames life as this ongoing process of trial, error, observation, and learning. Not just for, scientific discovery, but for your own moral and spiritual growth. And that is exactly the journey this book is all about.
So when Gandhi wrote his autobiography, his goal was so much bigger than just putting his life story on paper. He was meticulously documenting this lifelong quest to understand and actually live by what he called satya, or truth, a principle he believed was the ultimate foundation of, well, everything.
Okay, so with any experiment, you've got to understand the subject, right? And this part is absolutely crucial. Gandhi doesn't present himself as some kind of destined saint. He shows himself as a totally normal and, even a flawed young guy.
And this is where things get really interesting, because it just shatters the myth. We tend to picture Gandhi as this perfect, saintly figure, but in his own words, he is brutally honest about his youth. He lays it all out there, confessing to everything from eating meat, which was against his family's values, to stealing and even smoking. He did this on purpose because he believed that admitting your own faults was the absolute first step toward finding any kind of truth.
So when he went to London to study law, that became his first big test. He was surrounded by all these Western temptations, but he made a very conscious choice. Instead of just trying to fit in, he started his first real experiments in self-discipline, adopting a simple diet, keeping track of every penny, and really focusing on his moral values. This period was huge for him. It's where he started building that spiritual foundation that would guide him for the rest of his life.
All right, so after London, he heads to South Africa. And this is where his personal experiments are about to become a very public mission. You could say South Africa became the crucible, the place that would test everything he believed in and forge it into something that would literally change the world.
See, at the time, he was just a young lawyer, trying to make his way and do his job. But one shocking, deeply personal experience with racial injustice would ignite a fire in him and completely change the direction of his experiment and, as it turns out, the course of history.
And that one moment, it set off this incredible chain reaction. The trigger? Getting thrown off a train, even though he had a first-class ticket. But his reaction wasn't just anger. It was a deep resolve to fight this kind of discrimination. This led him to his method, creating communities like the Phoenix Settlement, where he could experiment with simple, self-sufficient living. And the result of all of this? A brand new, revolutionary formula for social change.
That formula was Satyagraha. And this concept, which really came out of all those experiments in South Africa, was just game-changing. It's not passive resistance. You have to understand it's an active force. It literally means truth force, and it's all about using nonviolent, courageous, moral power to confront injustice head-on. It was, for all intents and purposes, a weapon of peace.
So after spending 21 years in South Africa, basically perfecting his methods, Gandhi returned to India in 1915. Now he was ready to take his principles of Satyagraha and apply them on a massive national scale and test his formula against, the full might of the British Empire. And he didn't waste any time. He immediately put it all to the test. You see it with the oppressed indigo farmers in Champaran, then with the peasants who were facing crop failure in Kedah, and again with textile workers who were demanding fair wages in Ahmedabad. Each of these movements became another successful experiment, proving time and again that nonviolence could win real, tangible victories against injustice. So what's really at the heart of all this? What's the formula he was working with? Well, we can actually distill the philosophy that guided every single one of his experiments down to just a few core, interconnected principles.
You can think of these principles as being all interconnected, like pieces of a puzzle. For Gandhi, the ultimate goal was satya, or truth, which for him was basically God. The only way to get to that truth was through ahimsa, or absolute nonviolence. But to really practice nonviolence, you needed the other pieces: simplicity to avoid greed, self-discipline to control your own anger, and a life dedicated to service, which focused all that energy on helping others. Together, they create this really complete and powerful philosophy for how to live.
Okay, so why are we talking about this now? Why does an experiment from 100 years ago still matter so much today? Because the legacy of what he found offers these timeless lessons for how we can all live our own lives.
What he leaves us with is this incredible blueprint for life. First off, it shows us that real greatness isn't about being perfect from the start. It's about growing from your mistakes. It teaches us that timeless values like honesty and humility aren't weaknesses, they're sources of incredible strength. It proves that a person's character can be far more powerful than physical force. And ultimately, it gives us a lasting model for how to face injustice with peace and with dignity.
And all of this really brings us to one final powerful question. Gandhi dedicated his entire life to this one grand experiment with truth. So it kind of makes you think, if your life is an experiment, what's the central question you're trying to answer?